Surprise, surprise, Wisconsin ran the ball and Nebraska kept it close. Hi, I'm Aaron Muller, and this is episode 21 of the Cobsmacked Podcast. This is a Nebraska football podcast where we cover the Huskers season and team news as it progresses throughout the year. Every video episode is uploaded to YouTube, and the audio versions can be found on Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you enjoy the content, if you enjoy the episode, please consider leaving a like and following. It helps me spread the podcast and reach more ears. Getting into this week's recap, though, we have the Week 11 matchup against the number 15 Wisconsin Badgers. We ended up losing the game 28-35. Nebraska, getting into the stats, we had 351 passing yards on 35 attempts. We had 101 on the ground with another 35 rushing attempts for a total of 452 yards on 70 total plays. Wisconsin had 145 yards through the air on 18 attempts. They ran the ball 31 times for 252 yards. They ended with a total of 397 yards on 49 plays. Looking at the defenses, Nebraska had 1 sack and 2 tackles for losses, and Wisconsin had 3 tackles for losses with 2 interceptions. So that was a big turning point in the game. Special teams, Nebraska did not attempt a field goal. We had 2 punts for 38-yard average. Wisconsin did attempt a field goal, but they missed, and they had 2 punts for a 44-yard average. Nebraska got 22 first downs, and Wisconsin had 15. Time of possession, Nebraska had it for 33 minutes and 17 seconds, and Wisconsin had it for 26 minutes and 43 seconds. Penalties, Nebraska had 5 for 43 yards, and Wisconsin ended with 4 for 42 yards. So getting into that a little bit, first off, Ramir Johnson was out with an injury, and Marquise Stepp transferred out during this bye week. So that shook up the running back room a little bit. So the best rusher on the night was actually a wide receiver, sophomore Brody Belt. He came in and he had 7 carries for 31 yards. There wasn't a ton of success on the ground for Nebraska. We had a ton of guys play. So we had Brody Belt play, Marvin Scott the third played, Adrian took off a couple times, Marquise Stepp came in. You didn't see Yant. I was kind of expecting to see Jacques Yant come in and play, but we didn't see him at all. And I don't know if that's still the playbook issue that they had mentioned earlier this year, or if he just wasn't practicing well. I'm not sure what the issue was there. But I mean, you had a guy come in that was used to playing wide receiver. He comes in and he plays as your top running back essentially for the night, which is good to see. Marvin Scott III, Adrian, and Marquise Stepp all did find the end zone tonight, or yesterday night. But again, there wasn't a ton of success there. They were all like within 5 yards of the end zone that they scored on. But we did see them struggle in pass protection. So that was something that you've seen from Ramir Johnson. I believe Gabe Ervin was also really good at picking up blitzes when he was in before he got injured this season. But everybody else that came in and played tonight, they struggled with pass protection. There was just, I don't know if it was just a lack of practice, a lack of experience. None of these guys have really played a ton before this. But Adrian struggled all night with blitzes from Wisconsin. That was a lot of pressure from Wisconsin's front seven. They sent more pressure than any other team this season. They had blitzed 22 of Adrian's 36 dropbacks. So 2/3 of his plays, he was dealing with a blitz from Wisconsin. The offensive line ended with 4 penalties, and all 4 of them were on the offensive tackles. There was 2 for Teddy Corcoran and 2 for Bryce Benhart. So the tackles were dealing with it all night. They were getting holding calls. It was just an issue being able to contain the blitz and the pressure from Wisconsin. As a result of that, 26 of Adrian's passes were out of play action. So it helped to move the pocket. It gave Adrian just a little bit more time to use his feet, give himself some space to make throws. But you have to do that every time just to give him space, and it's not ideal. Silver lining there, Adrian Martinez is now the all-time leader in total offense at Nebraska. He has 10,690 yards, past Tommy Armstrong there. You have a lot of people critical of that record saying he has a ton of yards, yes, but he doesn't have the wins to go along with that. We'll get into it a little bit later as well, but he started out this game off strong as well. You can't put all of the struggles and woes on Adrian. You have to look at the teams he's had to play with, the talent he's had to play with, and the difficulties and obstacles that he's had to overcome. Like I mentioned, he did start this game strong, but he did struggle in the second half. The first half, he went 8 for 13 and 158 yards with 1 touchdown. Second half, he hit 15 for 22 on 193 yards with 2 interceptions. The first interception he did throw was to Oliver Martin. Oliver Martin seemingly just kind of stopped his route. It was a good ball. He should have went for it, but he just kind of stopped. I don't know if he thought he was going to get hit, so he just didn't run the route completely, but it just opened the defender up to pick the ball off. The second one was more on Adrian. He kind of threw a pass, lofted it way up there, and it floated a little too long and got picked off as well. Post-game, Adrian said, "I'm not going to make excuses. It was a bad throw." Listening to Scott, though, in his post-game, he said that he thinks that Adrian's shoulder injury that he's been dealing with, or the arm injury he's been dealing with, might have had more to do with that than Adrian would like to admit to. He's not going to use it as an excuse, though. He played a good game. Samori Toure was a big target for him. He had 11 targets. He ended with 7 catches on those with 113 yards and a touchdown to go with it. But really, this was a game for the tight ends for Nebraska. Nebraska and Wisconsin both had success going to their tight ends. Austin Allen had 7 receptions for 143 yards. 55 of those yards came after contact, so he wasn't only just catching big plays or big passes, he was also making yards after contact. He set the Nebraska single game record for tight ends receiving, and with the 7 receptions, that puts him up to 36 on the year, and so that is also a record for a tight end in a season. So we still have one more game to go. I assume we'll still see him. He'll be able to add to that. But Wisconsin's Jake Ferguson also ended the game with 8 receptions for 92 yards. So the tight ends on both sides of the ball were really big. Travis Vokalek for Nebraska also played. I believe him and Allen both ended with 60 snaps in the game. They played a ton of football. Whether they were going out for passes or not, they were very vital in trying to give Adrian time to throw the ball. They were picking up blocks. But I mean, the tight ends are going to be big for these kind of games where it's a physical game. You're going to have these big targets to throw to, and they were utilized very effectively. Nebraska ended with 452 yards and 28 points. That is against the number 1 ranked Wisconsin defense. So I mentioned in the preview that Wisconsin's defense was ranked first or second every single category that a defense is measured by. They were giving up a little over 200 yards and 14 points a game. Nebraska went 452 yards and 28 points. So it was the most yards allowed by a Badgers defense since 2019. That was also against Nebraska. We ended with 492 in that game, and we still lost. Same story, different book, right? That was the most yards that the Badgers have given up in Camp Randall at their home stadium since 2016 against OSU. So we had a ton of yards. We had we had enough points to win a game essentially, but you just needed a little bit more. You could use some help from the defense as well. We'll get into that, but we just need a little bit more from this offense. You had 6 of 11 drives go into the red zone, and 4 of those came away with points. You did have the 2 interceptions from Adrian, which accounts for 2 of those drives. Just things could have played out differently. You had multiple opportunities in the game to go ahead, to tie the game, to make this a win for Nebraska, and we just weren't able to capitalize on that. Looking at the defense, we were banged up on both sides of the ball, but the defense specifically seen a ton of big names out. We had Deontay Williams didn't play due to injury. You were hoping to see him in the game. He had practiced all week, but he just wasn't ready to play. Jojo Doman is out for the season with the hand injury that he had surgery on Monday. He's done for the season. Phildarius Payne didn't play due to injury. Damian Daniels only ended up playing 11 snaps in the game total due to his injury he's been dealing with. He's been dealing with like a shoulder issue that's kind of been popping up throughout games the last few weeks. Caleb Tanner went out of the game with I'm assuming it was a concussion. He looked really wobbly after he had a big collision with Braylon Allen, Wisconsin's running back. I think he might have come back in later in the game, but he missed a bunch of time because of that. So you had guys that missed the entire game because of injury. You had guys that played very limited roles in the game because of their injuries. It just wasn't great for Nebraska's black shirts. That being said, they allowed the most rushing yards and as a result the most points of the season. So you can attribute a lot of that to those injuries, but a lot of it was more on an execution side. They allowed 17-year-old Braylon Allen 22 carries for 228 yards and 3 touchdowns to average 10.4 yards per carry. He had 3 runs that were 20 yards or more, and 2 of those went for touchdowns. So he had a 71-yard scamper and a 53-yard run as well. You take away those explosive runs, and the Black Shirts did hold him to 18 carries for 82 yards, which is a 4.5-yard average. But you can't just do that. You have to look at he pounded the ball. Wisconsin pounded the ball at you until something broke open, and it broke open 3 different times. So you have to give credit to Wisconsin and their running attack, and you have to look at Nebraska and what they did wrong, and they missed a ton of tackles. You have to be impressed with Braylon Allen's patience as such a young running back. He ran right up to the pile up every time, and he would sit there and wait for a lane to open up, and he would take it, and then he had the speed to outrun your defenders. So the whole defense seemed to struggle with tackling. A lot of arm tackles he was just running through. He's a big guy. He was like 6'2", 240 pounds. I remember specifically Cam Taylor-Britt came in high in the middle, and it just bounced right off of him. You can't tackle a guy that big, that high. But I mean, we just struggled to tackle the whole game. There was a bunch of arm tackles got broken through, not just from Braylon Allen, just all over the field. All of the guys that they played, we were having trouble bringing them down at first contact, and that played a big role in them getting yardage. Specifically past the line of scrimmage, I think once they got past the line, they were breaking tackles in the secondary, and then that would give them a big lane to run up, which is how you see in the 71 and the 53-yard scamper off for touchdowns. But they didn't do anything surprising. Wisconsin didn't come into this game and play any trick plays or do anything that you weren't expecting. They ran the ball, and they played physical football. You have to give credit where it's due. Wisconsin outblocked a good Nebraska defense, and that allowed for a talented young monster of a running back to have a great game. Looking at the special teams, Chase Contreras did not attempt a field goal for Nebraska, but he was perfect on point afters, which is odd that we have to acknowledge that, but we've missed some this year, so nothing's for certain. And the special teams, big story being that the opening kickoff was returned for a touchdown. So Wisconsin going up by a touchdown 13 seconds into the game is not ideal by any means. That really set the tone for the game. You were playing from behind against a Wisconsin defense that has been touted as the best defense in the country. And it's just, I mean, we played from behind the whole game because of that. You deferred to the second half, hoping that your defense could go out there, trusting that your defense could go out there and shut down Wisconsin's offense, and then give your team the opportunity to go in and take the lead. You didn't even give your defense the opportunity to get out there and stop Wisconsin's offense. Special teams blunder allowed Wisconsin to go up by 7, essentially doing nothing. The offense didn't have to step on the field. They just got 7 free points, essentially. And that's just not how you wanted the game to go. Overall, Wisconsin does what Wisconsin does. They played physical, hard-nosed football. They ran the ball effectively. They played disciplined football as well. There was no turnovers and no costly mistakes, no costly penalties, officially. There was the big controversy on the obvious pass interference call on the last play for Nebraska. It was against Xavier Betts, who was going to go up for a pass, and he kind of just got run into like 4 yards before the ball even got to him. So it was right in front of officials. I'm not sure how they didn't see it. Nebraska would have had the ball on the 1st and goal on the 1 yard line. Scott mentioned post game that had we scored there, had we been able to punch that in, there was like 10 seconds left. Had we scored there, realistically, we had 2 plays. Even if it was 1st and goal, you didn't have enough time to run 4 plays. Realistically, you could have scored or run 2 plays and punched it in there, and they would have gone for 2. I was sitting here talking to my brother when we were watching it. I was like, do you go for 2 if we score here, just to go for the win? If you don't make it, you lose. But given the way that the game's been going and given the way that these close games end for Nebraska, do you go for 2 and try to win a one? And we didn't even get to that point. We didn't get the call. Scott said he would have went for 2 there, but we didn't even get the opportunity to do so. Nebraska ended up getting an unsportsmanlike penalty from the sideline. He was livid that we did not get the call. Watching the replays, I don't know how you miss it. But I'm not saying Nebraska wins if we do get it. I'm not going to sit here and rag on the officiating because it happens every week in college football, and it sucks. As a college football fan, not just a Nebraska fan, it sucks as a college football fan to see something like this every week in the Big Ten. Every week, every team has to deal with this kind of officiating. But I do think it's important not to blame specifically this game. I'm not going to say this for every game. In some situations, officiating has certainly caused a game to go one way. In this game specifically, I think it's important to not blame the whole game on that last call. we could have gotten that pass interference call and still not made a touchdown, still not converted on a 2-point conversion at the end. You can't blame the whole loss here on officiating. There was lots of opportunities, as I mentioned, on offense to score. There was lots of opportunities on defense to stop them from scoring, and we just weren't able to capitalize on those opportunities. So that is one thing that didn't go our way, the officiating, but you have to look at all the opportunities you were given and how you weren't able to capitalize on those. Wisconsin played strong in all three phases. Special teams, right at the beginning, they score. So that's all you can ask from your special teams. And then defense, they were able to stop Nebraska, as I mentioned, twice in the red zone. And their defense, or their offense, busted off rushing yards like no other. So Nebraska struggled in those areas, and so that was the difference in the game. Adrian specifically, throwing the 2 interceptions, he's taking a lot of flack again this week. You always fly on Twitter after the game and you see how many people bench Adrian, get Adrian out of here. I hope we don't see him ever again. I don't know how you can sit there and say that without having a good understanding of football. Maybe I don't know how you get there otherwise. He did miss some open throws, which are on him, but every quarterback's going to miss open throws. There's not going to be a quarterback that's just perfect all the time unless his name's Tom Brady. But I often wonder, like I was sitting there at work the other day and I was wondering, kind of like daydreaming to myself, like how great Adrian could have been had the development been better, had he had somebody that was able to develop him and his skill set better than Mario Verduzco. He has a strong relationship with Mario that it's going to be a lifelong thing for him. He's a good friend, but what has he done since his freshman year that has improved? What was Verduzco doing with him behind the scenes to make him a better quarterback? I didn't see it. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism on there, and that's probably why he's not there anymore. But had Adrian had somebody that was able to work with his skill set, specifically like using his feet, because he is such an explosive runner, using his feet to score more, using his feet to pick up yards, using his feet to just scramble out and give himself an opportunity to throw the ball. Look at like Patrick Mahomes when he's healthy, how much better of a quarterback he is. Now couple that with, had we had a good offensive line this year and last year, how much different does Adrian Martinez look? He already is the career leader in overall yards. What does he look like if he's able to sit in a pocket and throw the ball confidently, knowing he's not going to get hit, or getting a hole to run through without having to run through 3 or 4 linemen to get to an open space? I mean, you just sit here and you daydream. I'm sure you could do this any year, not just quarterbacks. Look at any player and you look at the what ifs. What if you had a better team? What if you had a better offensive line solely? Take away you're still stuck with Mario Verduzco. You have a better offensive line, and Adrian is, 30% better, 25% better, which is still a market improvement. What does this win-loss mean for Nebraska? There wasn't much at stake for Nebraska to begin with. We already have a losing season on our hands. We did not make a bowl game, but we were close to being another good team. We actually tied for the record for the most one-score losses in a single season at 7. If Iowa goes the same route, if we hit the same blueprint, Nebraska will be the whole, or hold that record solely. We will have 8 losses and we will forever be in the record books. But we didn't have anything really to lose here. We had a lot to gain by beating a good Wisconsin team for the first time since 2012, especially at Camp Randall. But we just weren't able to pull it off. Looking forward, it's great to see that the team was still fighting. I did want to mention that you've seen Austin Allen have a good game. You saw a lot of the seniors and a lot of the older guys have good games. But that was a question coming in, was after all of the shakeup on the offensive staff, if you were going to see guys give up and quit, because we are just a 3-win team. You could see a ton of players just giving up at that point. And that's usually what you see when you see a team only have 3 wins this late in the year. You're going to probably end with 3 or 4 wins on a season. Those teams typically get blown out because there's just no motivation to continue and try anymore. But you didn't see that. You've seen the team fight. You've seen the team play. You've seen individuals giving big effort. And I hope to see more of that to finish the season at home against Iowa on Black Friday. It's always a good game against Iowa. It's always like almost a rivalry at this point. But can you call it a rivalry when we haven't won in how many years? 7, 8 years or whatever it is. But we're going to get more into that on the preview on Wednesday. But that's going to wrap up this week's recap. Otherwise, we will be back here, as I mentioned, on Wednesday for the last pregame analysis for the 2021 season. It's kind of crazy that it's flown by so fast. Comment below, though, and find me on Twitter at the Cobsmacked Pod. So until next time, go Big Red.